evening, fellow Americans. This is Faith Jepson reporting from Copenhagen, Denmark. We are here post-war to interview a young girl named Anne-Marie, whose family helped a Jewish family survive the war. So, Anne-Marie, thank you for being here to share your story. Can you tell us what life was like before the war?
Well, there was plenty of food, and there were no limits to our electricity. We went to school freely, and there was no fear of going out at night. And also, we could go and come as we could please, without any problem. Life was good, and we had all that we needed. There was no fear.
Well, that sounds like a good life before the Germans invaded. So, are you a good student in school?
Yes, I enjoy going to school and being with my friends and learning new things. My teachers are so encouraging, and they take their time to help me, even if I don't understand things, but they will help me with that. And there are no restrictions on what they teach us.
Those sound like wonderful teachers. Who are your friends at school?
Well, my best friend is Ellen Rosen, and before the war, she could worship freely in the synagogue. They're Jewish.
When you were racing Ellen on the sidewalk and you were stopped by the German soldiers, what was running through your mind? Did you think that they were going to arrest you for running on the sidewalk? Are the German soldiers really that mean?
Well, the first thing that popped into my head was Kirsty. Kirsty has a major attitude, and I was afraid that Kirsty would disrespect the soldiers and get us in big trouble for not respecting them. Was I afraid of the German soldiers arresting us? No, I was not, because you can't arrest someone for just a minor thing that they did, like a silly little game that we were playing. But they can yell at us and send the issue to our parents. Thankfully, those German soldiers weren't as mean.
So did Kirsty cause any problems in the end?
When the soldier tried to touch Kirsty's hair, Kirsty swatted his hand away and said, "Don't touch me." So Kirsty reminded the German soldier of his little daughter at home. So the German soldier told us to go home and to study our school books. No, Kirsty was not a problem.
What was Ellen doing when you were there?
Ellen just stood there with a pale face and a statue-like body. She was worried that the German soldiers would notice her necklace, finding out that she was a Jew.
Oh yes, the German or Nazis are very anti-Semitic.
What's anti-Semitic?
It means when people are mean and hate people just because they are Jewish. Could you imagine if people hated you just because you're Danish?
I don't understand how people can be so cruel to people they have never even met. The Jews had never done anything to hurt them, but that's what the Germans did.
That is so true about people judging people by their history. Speaking of history, how did you and Ellen meet?
Our families live in the same apartment and have been friends for as long as I can remember. Ellen is more than a friend to me, but a sister.
That is amazing that you're so close that you can see each other every day. But when the Germans invaded Denmark, how did that affect your daily routine?
We couldn't eat certain foods anymore because there was a shortage. And Kirsty was mad because we couldn't make our delicious vanilla pink frosted cupcakes anymore. There was also a shortage of electricity, so we couldn't use the stove as often as we used to. A curfew was put into place every night, and we had to be in by dark. I did not want to be caught by the soldiers at night. They were mean guys, and sometimes they would speak in their own language, so we couldn't understand what they were saying. And yeah, I just didn't want to be caught there. And the worst of all, they were hunting down Jewish families and killing them just because they were Jews.
Oh my goodness, it sounds scary to not know where your next meal is coming and whether or not you'll have heat in your house during winter time. But the scariest of all is losing your friends just because they're Jews. Can you tell me what happened to Ellen and her family?
One night, the soldiers were going through our apartment building. So Mr. Rosen, Ellen's dad, had decided to keep Ellen with us, and the rest of her family went to hide somewhere else for the night. The soldiers were knocking on our door, and I realized Ellen had her Star of David necklace on, so I reached over and ripped it off of her neck. And if they had seen that necklace on her, they would have realized she was Jewish and taken her away. That sure was a close call.
That sounds pretty intense. What happened next after the soldiers left?
The next day, we went to my Uncle Henrik's house. He is my mom's brother and a fisherman, to spend a small vacation there. But secretly, we were there for a funeral.
Who was the funeral for? Who died that you were close to?
The funeral was for my great-aunt Bert. I didn't hear a great-aunt Bert in my mother's stories that she had told me, so I suspected my uncle and my mother were lying to me. They finally told me that there was not a great-aunt Bert, and that it was better for me to not know some things so that I could still be brave.
Why does your family think it's best to not know everything so you can still be brave when the time comes?
Because if you knew about the situation, it would be harder for you to be brave.
That is such a good policy to live by. Your Uncle Henrik must be so wise. How did your Uncle Henrik deal with the situation?
Uncle Henrik left the funeral early to prepare for the escape. He wanted to get a head start so he could get his boat set up.
When everything seemed to fall into place during the funeral, how were you feeling when you realized your best friend was going to leave you?
I didn't want her to leave me because our friendship was so special and being in Sweden just couldn't break our friendship. But I knew that I would see her again. And one day we would meet again and she would tell me all her stories about Sweden.
You guys have gone through so much that I can see your friendship lasting till the day you die. Speaking of death, when you were approached by the German soldiers, when you were taking the handkerchief to Uncle Henrik, did you think the German soldiers would arrest you?
No, I was not afraid that they would arrest me, but I was concerned that they would find the handkerchief and simply think that it was a stupid little thing and tear it apart. I didn't know what that handkerchief had meant to Uncle Henrik, but all I knew was that he needed that handkerchief right then. Uncle Henrik was right. If you didn't know so much about the situation, then you could find yourself braver than you expected yourself. For example, I didn't know what the handkerchief was, or its purpose, but I knew that I had to get it to the boat. So I didn't even think about the risks I was taking when I was traveling to the dock. All I thought about was the task ahead. So when the German soldiers approached me, all I thought about was my task, and I didn't notice I was being so brave.
Wow, what a great explanation. You must have really just thought about the task and how to deal with it. You didn't even realize you were being brave? Wow. When you found out about the handkerchief, what was your reaction?
When I found out, I was so surprised because to me it just seemed like a plain old rag. But how genius of them to think of that as a decoy for the dogs, to not sniff the humans hiding on the boat. It's brilliant.
It really is a brilliant idea. Who came up with this fantastic plan, and how does the handkerchief affect the dog's smell?
The scientists in Sweden came up with this idea to help protect the Jews. The Jews' trip from Denmark to Sweden. The handkerchief is made out of dried rabbit's blood and cocaine, which dulls the dog's sense of smell for a certain period of time. Once the dogs were numb to the smell of humans, we were free to go without question.
Wow, that is quite a combination. It's interesting how that such a small thing could save so many lives. Hats off to the scientists. So, last question for tonight. When Ellen came home, what was your reaction?
When Ellen came home, I was overjoyed to see her and to hear her stories about her time in Sweden and the safety that her family and fellow Jews enjoyed, free from the German occupation in Denmark. It was so great to have my best friend back home and we could reconnect where we had left off. Isn't that what best friends do?
It certainly is, and it sounds like you will be even closer than before. Thank you, Anne-Marie, for joining us this evening for this special interview. We appreciate your time. This is Faith Judson signing off until next time. Be there or be square in Copenhagen, Denmark.